What is Bionet Asia?
A company developing a new pertussis vaccine.
This is a for-profit company as well?
Yes.
Okay. And you're on the board of this company as well?
Yes.
That affiliation also wasn't disclosed in your CV, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned one of the companies was in the process of developing trying to develop a new pertussis vaccine. Which company was that again?
Bionet.
Thank you. Why are they trying to develop a new pertussis vaccine?
Because a problem with current acellular vaccines is that although they are protective, the protection doesn't last as long as we would like. And Bionet has developed a component of pertussis vaccine that should give longer lasting responses.
How long does the current immunity last from the current acellular pertussis vaccine?
Well, it lasts for probably on the order of 5 years, but the efficacy diminishes after 2 years or so, and the result is that there have been more pertussis in adolescents than we would like.
So when you say after 5 years, the immunity's gone, in 2 years, the efficacy, do you mean after the, how many dose, the 4 or 5 dose DTaP series?
Well, I should go into some detail. The first
30 seconds.
The first 3 doses are given.
You know what? I apologize.
Okay.
It's about to run out, and I don't want to give the video for a hard time.
This ends disc 1 of the deposition of Dr. Stanley Plotkin. We're going off the record. The time is 10:32.
I apologize for cutting off.
This is the beginning of tape number 2 of the deposition of Dr. Stanley Plotkin. We are on the record. The time is 10:42.
Okay. Thank you. Apologies again for cutting off your answer to the last question. The tape needed to be changed. If you could kindly read back the last question to give Dr. Plotkin an opportunity to respond.
Question. So when you say after 5 years immunity is gone, in 2 years efficacy, do you mean after dash the 4 or 5 dose DTaP series? Answer. I should go into some detail. The first dash, well, answer. The first 3 doses are given dash, you know what, I apologize. It's got to run out.
So pertussis vaccine is given in 3 doses in infancy and is quite protective during the childhood or infancy years. Then there's a booster dose given before school entry, and that results in protection, pretty protection for 2-3 years, but then begins to fade when the child reaches 8 or 9 years. And a dose is recommended in pre-adolescence. And there in particular, what's been found is that with the so-called acellular vaccines, that after 2 or 3 years, that the efficacy diminishes considerably. And so there are efforts to try to improve that persistence of efficacy, and Bionet is one of the companies that is in effect trying to develop a longer lasting acellular pertussis vaccine. There are other companies also working to improve the vaccine for adolescents.
So the last vaccine recommended for adolescents is around what age of Tdap or a diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis containing vaccine?
13, 11,
13. Okay. And did I understand correctly that few years after that last dose, most folks who've gotten that vaccine are no longer immune to pertussis?
Well, most folks is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration, but
Okay.
it depends on the study. But certainly I would say that the high effectiveness that's seen initially after the vaccine diminishes considerably by 5 years.
And what do you mean by considerably?
Well, so it falls somewhere between 30 to 50% protection. So it's not nearly as good as after the vaccine dose is given.
Okay, so after the last vaccine dose in adolescents, 5 years later, only 30 to 50% of people are receiving the CDC recommended childhood schedule are protected from pertussis.
Yes.
Okay. How about 10 years out?
I'm not sure there are many studies that go that far out, but I would imagine that the protection is diminished considerably by that time.
So most adults aren't protected for pertussis.
Not unless they've received a booster dose. But that being said, it becomes complicated because if they are infected with the organism that causes pertussis, even if they are not ill because of it, they will get a natural booster, and so they may not have symptomatic pertussis. Pertussis is not uncommon in adults, but the epidemiology is not as well established as it is for children.
But in terms of protection from vaccination from pertussis, most adults are not protected from the vaccination. You're saying if they're protected from exposure to the actual pertussis. Is it bacteria?
Yes. But you have to bear in mind that pertussis as a disease is most important in the newborn and in children. And fortunately, we have very effective means of preventing pertussis in those highly susceptible individuals. Adults will have a cough disease, but they won't die of pertussis. So although we want to protect them as well, the main point of pertussis vaccine is to protect the newborn and the young child.
So is it only really dangerous in the first few months of life, or?
Yes, infants with pertussis may frequently die of pertussis, and that's why immunization in pregnancy is now practiced. In other words, to provide passive immunity to the infant during the first months of life before the infant is vaccinated.
And if the mother had been exposed to pertussis bacteria itself and had immunity that way, that would also confer immunity to the baby?
Yes, but one can't depend on that, whereas if you give a dose of vaccine during pregnancy, you can depend on the antibodies passing to the infant.
Does the acellular pertussis vaccine prevent?
Sorry, say it again.
Does the acellular pertussis vaccine prevent the infection and transmission of pertussis in the person vaccinated with acellular pertussis vaccine?
Well, that's an area of active research. It appears that the acellular vaccines don't protect the individual from carrying the organism as much as the so-called whole cell pertussis vaccines did. But those data are based largely on animal studies, and we don't really have a lot of human data to tell us whether the animal results are true in humans or not. But there is a concern that the acellular vaccines may not protect an individual from passing the organism to another individual, even if the vaccinated person doesn't get sick himself or herself.
What animals were used in those studies?
Baboons.
Why were baboons used?
Why were baboons used? Because they are susceptible to pertussis, and obviously they're close to humans.
Would those experiments be ethical to do with people as opposed to baboons?
Well, I'm not sure it would be ethical to infect someone with pertussis. That would require an ethical committee to consider how the experiment would be done. For example, if someone were infected with pertussis and then given antibiotics soon after administration of the organism, that could be ethical because the antibiotics would cure the individual before he or she becomes ill.
Wouldn't that mess up the study, though?
Sorry?
Wouldn't that mess up the study in terms of?
It would certainly influence the study, but it could allow us to determine whether an individual who has been vaccinated with the acellular vaccine can pass the organism despite that vaccination to another individual.
Has that study been done?
No,
Okay.
it has not yet been done.
In terms of the study that was done with baboons, that study,
Yes.
could that study be done with humans? Do you think any IRB approval could ever be obtained to do that study with humans?
To allow an individual to develop symptomatic pertussis, I don't think that would be approved.
Okay. What was, so in terms of the baboon studies that were done, those are about as good as you're going to get for those studies because you can't do the human studies, correct? In terms of evidence about the transmissibility and infection of pertussis from
yes, but
after acellular pertussis vaccination.
yes, but I believe that workers are trying to determine whether vaccinated individuals are still colonized by the pertussis organism. If they are colonized, then they probably could transmit to others. I mean, there's a lot of work going on in this field, including developing an attenuated Bordetella pertussis, which could be given to boost immunity and in particular to prevent carriage. So, as I said, this is a very active area of investigation.